My view is that the final decision we make as a city council should reflect what is in the best interest of our residents. We certainly get the opinion of different people, whether it's public counsel, whether it's our council, whether it's experts. But at the end of the day, it's what is in the best interest of our residents. And as it's currently proposed, I can't support the agreement as is. So I'm going to suggest some recommendations in a moment that perhaps we can pursue. I do want to just specify that, and I think my council colleagues will agree, that we have spoken repeatedly about the need for other cities to share in the responsibility of taking care of homeless people and families. And the main message that we have conveyed, whether it's at community meetings, whether it's at city council meetings, whether it's talking to residents one-on-one, or whether it's talking to businesses, is that Pomona will not bear the brunt of housing our homeless in the region. And I might add that our city has been incredibly generous over the years in terms of providing services to our most vulnerable communities. As you well know, we have a lot of social services that we provide in this community, which certainly draws part of our homeless population to be near those services, whether it's mental health services, whether it's work job-related services. And so I can tell you, and I think you will all agree, that we are doing so much for the region as it relates to helping our most vulnerable members of the community. So to the city's credit, we took a major step to address homelessness when we decided to build the Homeless Service Center at 1400 East Mission Boulevard that could house up to 390 individuals. That project will be completed soon, by the end of this month, and certainly by mid-November, we should begin seeing homeless people at the center. And in fact, Pomona is doing its part, which brings me to our housing element obligation. I think part of what we're being asked to decide is, what is our obligation, right? And this is what we know. On April 27, 2018, we received a letter from HED that stated, quote, "The revised draft element conditionally meets the statutory requirements of state housing element law, Article 10.6 of the Government Code. This finding of compliance is conditioned on implementation of Program 2.16, which is to identify and make zoning available for additional sites to permit emergency shelters without discretionary action sufficient to accommodate the need." And I want to emphasize, to accommodate the need for emergency shelters. What is the need? If we use the number that was agreed upon in the settlement with public counsel, and correct me if I'm wrong, that number is 515. Is that correct? It's 515? Okay. A soon-to-be-completed homeless service center at 1400 East Mission Boulevard can accommodate up to 390, and I actually think in the documents that we sent, it's 319, which leaves us to account for 125 beds. The 1390 East Mission Boulevard site can accommodate an additional 70 by right, which brings the number down to 55 beds. So in essence, we need to create an emergency shelter overlay zone for 55 beds. Now, we can dispute that or debate that, but even if it's 100, we're not talking about having to accommodate an additional 515 beds, because we have been telling residents for the last year that by building this homeless service center, that was going to work, that was going to meet the obligation or work towards meeting the obligation of HCD. And what I'm hearing being said is that no, it won't, because it's owned by the city. Well, if the message that we're sending to cities is don't build homeless service centers, then how can we expect other cities to step up and take responsibility for homelessness? To me, I find that unacceptable, and I find it hard to believe that HCD would say, no, cities, you're not doing the right thing by actually building, not just even imagining, not even just planning, but actually building it.
In your own land.
And being at the very forefront in the state of California around homelessness. So the biggest concern that residents have raised with me in the course of the past 2 years is that by building a homeless service center, more people will come to Pomona. While I can appreciate their concern, I've always felt that the right thing to do is to do everything we can to solve this problem. And this is part of our effort. It is not the end effort. It is not the goal to keep people in homeless service centers. The goal is to build housing so that people, wherever it is, they can get their lives back and they can have the support that they need. To not count what we have committed to do, as I've said already, sends the wrong message to our residents in other cities. And in essence, as I've said, if other cities decide to build a homeless shelter, it will not count towards their homeless obligation. Let's allow HCD to make that decision for us. Okay? We are one of the few cities in the state that is building a shelter for the homeless. And how can HCD tell us we are not meeting our housing law? So I believe that we should reconsider the size of the emergency shelter overlay as recommended by the Planning Commission based upon public comments. And I asked that the Planning Commissioner chair be here because I know that the Planning Commission conveyed very strongly, even though they voted to bring it forward to us, that they conveyed very strongly serious issues that they had with the housing element. So this is what I'd like to propose for consideration. Okay. I believe, one, that we should include 1390 and 1400 East Mission Boulevard in the calculation of the 515 shelter beds as previously submitted to HCD in February and approved by HCD in their April 27th, 2018 letter, and provide an analysis of the capacity to expand the number of beds at those sites to accommodate future needs. In other words, our legal counsel and city staff need to make the argument that these two sites and the investment we have made as a city to build at 1400 East Mission Boulevard demonstrates clearly our commitment to ending homelessness in Pomona. Thus, I would add these two sites and leave American Recovery Site as an additional option. And remove the overlay zone as currently recommended by staff, which is 1, 2, 3, and 4. We've already taken discretionary action on the two sites. 71, so that's what I would say. Also, and this is something that I think that has been clearly stated to me privately, is that we have an existing family shelter that would like to increase the number of families that they take care of. And they have never been a problem in our community. And they want to be considered as expanding the family shelter. And what we're talking about is maybe 15, 20 additional support for families. And do you know the ballpark figure on that? Oh, Mario, do you know?
Sir, actually went over to visit the site. So they have 13 beds now, and they want to go to 20.
So we're talking about seven more, right? And that's not part of this overlay zone. I really think that we need to add that to the overlay zone. Lastly, I think we should consider, and it's been stated before, and I know Councilmember Torres was leaning towards this, and it was stated by Ron Williams, is to consider a citizen committee to oversee the new homeless service center and regularly report to the city council regarding ongoing community concerns and capacity issues to ensure that the city has sufficient shelter beds to meet the need in the community and better ensure compliance with housing element law. I've said a lot, and so I leave it to my colleagues to give their input.